when they are going to read the budget. Because all that you hear are matters that relate to inflation, growth rates, and the disbursement and use of our resources. And then that is all. But I would think that the most important thing, and the question would have been, how are we using these resources? How do we plan for it? And where do we put it? And these answers rest in our own constitution and the good mind that wrote it, that it should lie with the National Development Planning Commission to provide the necessary guidance. And so if you look at the functions of the National Development Planning Commission, it is clearly spelled out there. The utilization of the resources of this country. And in addition to that, they brought that term there, phrase there, to ensure balanced development of this country. And not only that, but also to undertake clear studies. So it's not just sharing it, but to undertake clear studies and research as to how we can optimize the use of these resources. It is there in our Constitution, expressed also in the Act, the 479, and specifically also in the LI, which guides our work, 2232. And it's all spelled out over there to help us. But this is an institution. Just 20 minutes ago, I was having a discussion with one of the directors of Ministry of Finance. And he said, he was shocked when he saw what was released to us quarterly, the third quarter, for our technical work. The directors are here, 100,000 Ghana cedis. 100,000 Ghana cedis for all the planning work within the quarter, the third quarter. And the third quarter is a vital quarter because that is where the plan is supposed. The plan is supposed to lay the budget for it to be presented in November. And my directors are here. But this is to establish how an august institution is now being deprived of the necessary things which will still give it that accolade august. And how all the good thinking which are enshrined in our Constitution and our laws are being interpreted in a way that we are still waiting for the fruits which was anticipated by all these statutes. And because this commission is virtually using the word lemping. Let me start by four things, key logics which will guide all the discussion I want to bring about this afternoon. The first one has to do with the technical logic of planning. And these are the technical things that we do as a country in order to optimize the use of our resources, to be able to establish a real sustainable development process, and again, most importantly, to build resilience. To build resilience. It is not accidental if you want to achieve any of these things. It means that your technical logic must be right. The second one is the legitimacy. Do we have the needed authority? Do we have the needed support? Okay. And to be able to undertake this task which have been given to us. So the statutes, the policies, do they support us to be able to accomplish these tasks? That is the second. The fourth one, which is very, very important, and I hear it always, is ownership. Ownership. Who owns these plans? Is it for NDPC? Is it for the government? Is it for the MDAs? Does it include the private sector in any way? What about the civil society? Do they have a share in this in terms of ownership? And what about our citizens and our people who are represented by parliament? Do they own these plans which are sent to them from time to time for approval? Or do they see it as a document of NDPC? So legitimacy is an issue, but ownership is critical. And last but not the least is the inclusion. Do we make conscious effort to include people in the planning process? Or is just a technical document which is celebrated when it is launched at Accra International Conference Center and a big press support which lasts for only one day? Or we see it as a document owned by us, and therefore we must include everybody in the thinking, in the implementation, in the evaluation, and the reporting of this document. So I'm just going to lead this discussion along these four areas. The area of technical logic, the area of legitimacy, the area of ownership, and the area of inclusion. Now let's look at the technical logic. Yes, we have perfected our art of planning over the period because we started long ago, and one of the first in Africa, as way back as 1920. We had a plan when we were even under colonial rule at Gold Coast. In a way, it was to serve the colonial purpose of being able to grow if needed, but to exploit some of these resources and being able to ship them out in a way. But nevertheless, it has certain aspects of it, often described as placation, so far as development is concerned. But it created a fundamental base for us that the colonial process did not only look at exploiting and taking away the resources, but they also talked about giving the key ingredient to support the development of these resources. And today, we're happy to say some of the oldest institutions, including Achimota School, came out of this plan. The Kolebu Teaching Hospital came out of this plan. The Takrade Hapo came out of this plan. The major bridges over the Pra River, over the Ankobra River, all of that, way back in 1920, were planned and they were all executed within 10 years, accomplished. But what happened thereafter? Did the logic change? Yes, we went through a period of turbulence, but we all agreed that by 1951 we had settled. And therefore another plan was developed. And we all remember the first, it was first a 10-year development plan from 1951 to 1960. But well executed the first 6 years, such that there was a base established for education in the country. We all remember those days we have the National Trust Schools. And many of us, I'm sure sitting here, might have benefited from those schools. Under that plan, there was a huge effort to begin our industrialization process and to be able to create alternatives for those things that were important and also be able to process some of the raw materials we had here. And so there was a whole industrial plan developed, an authority established, what we call the IDE, established to be able to implement this process. Under that same plan, the thought was also to enhance infrastructure, and particularly focusing on the developing the northern part of the country. And therefore, there was a conscious means of linking up our roads to be able to go through the means of transport to reach there, to be able to begin a new area of mechanized farming in some of these areas. Well planned, but partly executed. It was 1987, we gained independence, and there was a need to go on a new GA. So we only had a transitional plan so that it could give us a breathing space for us to plan and develop thereafter independence, where we gained freedom. We spent a lot of time on the drawing table, invited knowledgeable Ghanaians, and we cannot say it without mentioning the venerable E.Mensah. And other renowned Ghanaians from our own Ministry of Finance in those days, and we were planning to team up to develop this. Some international consultants were actually invited. And this was done. Fortunately, maybe we spent too much time on the drawing board, such that by the time we started the implementation in 1963, it only lasted for 2 years. And the government was changed. We went through a period of short-term planning, 10 years here and there, without any long, far-sighted vision of where we want to be as a country. So short plans, 2 years, 3 years. The longest during that period had to do with the military government between 1975 and 1969. But even those times, the shorter periods of civilian governments in those times also started. We know very well, 1969, there was a plan looking at rural development, which consciously opened up the rural communities. Provision of roads, water, sanitation facilities. And these were the time a lot of these public facilities were introduced. But that also lasted for 2 years. Then we came up another. And throughout all these periods, we never forgot our dear friend IMF, which we cried to in terms of crisis, to come again and respark this very kind of plan. So we went through this process, there on. In 1992, we had virtually settled. We went for a republic. And that is when the National Development Planning Commission was given a rebirth. And let me say that way back in 1960, there was a National Planning Commission that was established to develop the 7-year development plan and then thereon. But it fell into oblivion after that. Brought back in 1992. In 1992, the Planning Commission in our Constitution was given 2 major mandates. One, to advise the President, and the emphasis is on advice. So the Commission was established but to advise the President. Our own Constitution is there, 87.1. The second one was to carry out studies. So the second one was to carry out studies. But studies relating to the use of our resources, ensuring balanced growth, ensuring that projects are implemented, and not only that, but also oversee the implementation of all government policies, programs, projects, monitor, evaluate, and report to Parliament. So this is well enshrined. Acts were given for us to work on it. But the technical logic is very, very important. We have never deviated from that technical logic when it comes to planning and making use of these rules, which then gave legitimacy again to planning the country. But the basic thing, if you look at from 1951, all the effort has been towards restructuring this economy. The mandate which was given to National Development Planning Commission and is still with us. Why? Because we realize that there is no way we can develop this economy when the industrial and manufacturing sector is not growing and is not strong enough. Because that is the pool for all the primary products that we have. And there are many of them, agrarian ones, cocoa, oil palm, rubber, all these things have been there for quite a long time. And then we are fortunate all the other minerals, gold, diamond, manganese, and now we keep on adding lithium, cobalt, oil, we're still adding. But all these also support the primary growth. So you realize that the primary sector is always growing. And the average, sometimes we're able to hit just the primary sector alone at a growth rate of 8%. And some of them even going beyond 8. The average being around 6%. And then what we do is that we send all these raw materials out. But we basically do not process any of this. We all know the first gold refinery in the country was within the last 5 years. And we've been mining gold for 400 years. But all that we do is to export in the commercial entities outside. And we can do so even with cocoa, even with our own cocoa. The records show that we are not processing more than 30%. So 70% is raw. We send it raw outside. So what happened is that all the jobs, all the other activities, that all economic activities associated with all these products, we take all of them outside. And the primary activity is only 20% of the gains. So the 80% is sent outside. And then when you send it outside, it comes back in the way of imports for us. And therefore, where does it result? It results in the growth in the service sector. So trade is growing, wholesaling is growing. Okay? And we're so happy. The service sector goes within the banking and the insurance activity, and that is growing at a rate of around 10% each year. That is what we're gaining from it. But that is quite minimal compared to what the sector which is in the middle could provide for us. So primary sector is growing, agriculture and mining and the rest. Secondary sector is growing, but manufacturing sector, we're still hovering around 2% of growth rate. And there is no way we can move beyond the so-called lower middle income if we're still hovering around 2% in the area where we think and we know by studies it will give us the real, what we call the trajectory for our development. And the trigger for our development, that is it. So we're still hovering around 2%. So if you look at all the plans of the country, that is what it has been doing. How do we grow the middle part? The problem is that we still haven't resolved why the middle part is not growing. Because we are not linking the manufacturing and the processing to the primary sector, which is agriculture. For us to link, we need technology, we need skills, we need knowledge, we need the development of the energy sector. That is key. But are we growing those skills? In a country where 8 million people out of 32 million cannot read and write. So all these things that we write and put in there are 8 million people, when they see, they will pass. How do we then push the development? We communicate and we leave them out. When it comes to skill development, it's the same. When oil was discovered in this country, we're all here. A lot of people were sent out to be trained. Yes. And many of them came back with PhDs in energy management. PhDs in I have a very good friend who did that. PhD in energy law. And they all came back. But what did we need at that time? Indeed, with these PhDs, and even in our own universities, that's what we are turning out. Go to University of Cape Coast, go to KNUST, go to University of Ghana. It's the same thing we are turning out. And then bring people from India, South Africa, and China to come and do the work on the field. And then the same people who went for the PhDs and the masters go around and say we don't have jobs. When we are importing people to come and do the job on the rigs. So it tells us that there's something wrong with our whole human capital development strategy. At the National Development Planning Commission, on our own volition, we decided that look, let's team up with the Ghana Statistical Service and the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations and develop a human development strategy which can help us to tap into the development and the processing of these primary products which you have been exporting. You know, I don't want to tell the story because when I say it, my directors here get demoralized. But the sad part of it is that even raising our own budget locally to be able to support this process, simple meetings in our own premises, and all that some of these people need is a cup of tea and some biscuits to encourage them to stay on, is a challenge. Even that, we have to go around the development partners. Fortunately, we got to one which was sympathetic. It took a German NGO to come and support Ghana to develop its own human development strategy. And this is key in developing this middle part, because that will indicate to the tertiary institutions which skills do we need in the industrial sector, so to be trained. If we are going through TVET, which areas should they specialize? And we had very many revealing things during this research at the National Development Planning Commission. One of the things which came out was very clear: to develop our human strategy and be able to process our resources. We did not even have standards for the very things we want to export and send it out. And I always ask questions whenever I had opportunity like this. What is the standard size of a door in Ghana? The standard size for a window, it rests in the pockets of the carpenter or the mason. So for each window that you produce, you need to go and measure the building and come and produce one. There is no way we can develop with that. We had opportunity some time ago. Aqua program, I'm sure a lot of you heard about it. We're supposed to produce apparatus and all those things. But in a country which doesn't have a standard size, what is large in Ghana, large size, we don't even have extra large, no. How do we produce and export? You go to a Ghanaian tailor, oh, like this part, oh, baby. Then they help you to adjust. Exporting it in a country where 0.01 of a milliliter is a concern for them. So, you cannot. And this is revealed to us. We saw it there. We spoke to the private sector. And he said, that is our concern. We don't have standards for the very things we want to export and produce. Up to today, as we sit here, for many, many Ghanaians, we don't even know weights. So how do you send things out? If Nigeria needs aluminum paints, which we can produce in Ghana, and they tell a Ghanaian manufacturer, oh, can you get an aluminum paint? They will start producing. But you send it to Nigeria, and it will not fit any window there. Because we don't have standard, we think the others do not have. But that is part of our training. I and you might have gone through that. So we came out with a program with ourselves, Ministry of Employment, and then work with Standards Authority, with the private sector, called the Precision Quality. This is a new training which this human development strategy got us to know, and we're pushing that. We have now established a program with the private sector and the ministry at Ho Technical University, Cape Ho Technical University, Takoradi Technical University, and then KU University, to serve as a nursing grounds for this. So the students are trained to be precise. You cannot be a scientist if you are not precise. But there are so many scientists in Ghana who are not precise. We don't work with standards. And we always argue for it to be accepted. But that is a culture we need to break if we want to industrialize. And that's what NDPC is saying. In a situation where they say that pick the salt and weigh, do this and put it in, it's gone. Because the food, we must be precise for somebody else to copy. And that is why the Chinese are exporting their food, Indians are exporting their food, and we find it difficult to export out. Because we don't even have standards for our own food. How much salt you put in, how much oil, and all those things, yes. But These are the things for us to move from the primary production into the second. The private sector is craving for jobs. Craving for job, people to come and work for them. But where are they looking? I was on a Joy TV with panelists, two of them. Private sector, one is a pharmacist, the other a hotelier. And they said it. If you employ a Ghanaian manager, be sure that your profit will be around 5%. Bring an Indian, you are 20%. Both of them, they said it there. So how would they go for us? And what is the reason that will compel them to go for a Ghanaian apart from nationalism? If the margin of profit is about 15% a gap. And the whole difference is that there was a fourth element we discovered: attitudes. Attitudes. So these are just to bring to you some of the work we are doing on that. But the bigger question is, how does this reflect at the national level and be able to influence and transform our country? The machinery for doing this are our statutes. Where does it reflect? In our policies? And we are not hiding this. We've done a study, we've looked at a lot of our policies, and you'll be surprised that many of them are conflicting. Many of them are competing, and many of them are not complementary to each other. And it's not only this year or the last 5 years, right from independence. That's what we've been doing. Sometimes we come up with a new policy and even a new statute, and the older one is still there. And so somebody will quote that to support a case, another person will quote a new one, and all that. And it's all around us. Our decentralization process is the same. What we have in the Local Government Act, the 936, you go to the Individual Sector Act, they also have different things there. So they don't meet. The local government says we are decentralized. Education says no, in my act it's not there. Health says no, in our act it's not there. So how can you decentralize when you have two statutes? One says that, the other says this. You go to spatial development in this country, all these flats around us. Look at the Kwapim Hill. As if we don't see it. But who is responsible? Is it NDPC? Is it local government? Is it LUSPA? Is it the district assembly? Is it the regional administration? Everybody is there. So Greater Accra is here, Eastern Region is here, everybody is cutting. But who is responsible? Who has the mandate to stop this and manage the space? And you can count the number of institutions and go to their statutes and you find all of this there. So everybody looks at each other and waits, and no accomplishment. Because there was an act in 1992 passed by NDPC which is responsible for managing the spatial sector of the country. And then way back in 1916, there's a land use and spatial planning authority established, which is also to manage the space. You go to the Local Government Act, it says that the local government is the authority, and they use the word, the planning authority of that space. So of all these three institutions, who manages what is going on in the brain? And we see it every day up the hill. See it. It's a disaster in the offing. We saw it on the Cape Coast Road. Whenever it rains, it blocks. But we saw it when the Wager Dam was there and people started cutting. And now, when it rains, just 3 hours, the place is flooded and virtually blocked. And this is our most economic road. But who is responsible? Is it roads and highways? Is it local government? Is it LUSPA? Is it NDPC? And you go to their statutes and everybody has a mandate. So everybody's waiting for each other. Right there. This is what is starting this process. So the legitimacy for institutions to be able to act, including NDPC, is a challenge. If you look at the Public Financial Management System and the Act in 1916, the 921, virtually, you read through it and you read the Act 480, there you see the challenges. 480 and 479 is about National Development Planning Commission, 1992. And years after, we come out with the 1916 Public Financial Management Act. And seem to be taking that same responsibility and giving it to Ministry of Finance. Because throughout the document it says minister. Minister is a small minister, and the reference to the minister is clearly there to minister responsible for finance. The same function virtually. So when it comes to, this is very, very vital, the management of our capital fund, the capital plan, two institutions have been given the same mandate virtually to manage. So National Development Planning Commission has what we call the National Infrastructure Plan, which is from 2018 that we completed all the way to 2047. We have come up with the vital infrastructure to cushion our development through these years. Done the economic analysis of the cost of each of these infrastructure. Spread it over the year, how much you require to be able to accomplish these things that we have planned. But it is on our website. It is a document which is in offices. And the biggest patrons of this document are our development partners. They are always on me for it. But yet, development is sequential. You can't go to 5 when you haven't done 1. And that's what we managed to do. Establish this sequence so that it will help us. Because infrastructure is such that if you invest in it and you are not able to complete what you have, the economists call it sunk cost. So you are not using it, and because it's a sunk cost, often we use loans to do that. So once the repayment period is up, whether you have used it or not, you have to start paying. And that is our biggest problem. So many things around us, they are sunk costs. So we are not reaping the full benefits of the money that we have put into it. And this is what we've structured over a long-term period of infrastructure plan, such that if we follow that, we'll be able to optimize. We'll be able to optimize. If you construct a railway line, let me give an example. From Takoradi to Manso, first grade railway line. It cannot be used. But adding a small stretch from Manso to Nsuta can help us to send the manganese to the port instead of using the road, which is a huge cost. And you'll be surprised, from Takoradi to Manso is about 32 kilometers. Well done. From Manso to Nsuta is just about 12 kilometers on down. So for the years, about 6-7 years, that we have not been able to complete the 12 kilometers, the 32 kilometers which has been accomplished is sunk cost. You can't use it. And yet, it's a loan. You have to pay. But you are not reaping. I'm just using this as an example, but there are many of them. We decided to take account of some of the projects we have in the country which have not been completed. There are some as far back as 1972, uncompleted. Yet we put money into it. That money, if it's a loan, we have even finished paying. And the facility is there, not used. And there are many of them. Very soon, we will launch that, and you see Ghana infrastructure database, and you see the number of them registered in space all around us. It's basically because the legitimacy that we have in planning, that we have created, we ourselves, through our own policies and statutes, have confronted that. So the National Development Planning Commission Act and the constitutional mandate given to us by way of authority and others, we've usurped it through the other acts and policy, dissipating its functions here and there. And therefore, the real coordination, which ought to help us in managing this process, is already challenged by our own statutes. And everybody is claiming a part of it. That is it. And sometimes we come up with a political reason for it. But quite often it is technical. It is very, very technical that we create. And we do all those things by our own self. Some of the acts and the policies. There is a process which has been established by convention that if a ministry defines a problem they want to solve, often it comes from their policy planning and monitoring evaluation unit, PPMED, and they analyze it. After analysis on determining the problem, they define how they want to solve it. National Development Planning Commission has developed guidelines to help us. What is the economic implication, social implication, political implication for every ministry? And then it comes to NDPC. At NDPC, we review these policies against existing policies. Where there are conflicts, we bring it back to you. So we do it at the policy level. That is the function. That is the process that ought to be. Before it goes back to the minister, minister goes to cabinet to present, and then it goes to, when approved, it goes to parliament, the attorney general, to develop it into an act or a law.